Hi, my name is Smriti Mundhra, and I'm the director of The Romantics, and you're tuned into the Urban Asian.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Urban Asian. And I have an amazing guest today, one of my favorite filmmakers, Smriti Mundhra. Thanks so much for taking time and talking to us. I have to tell you, I watched the premiere in New York City and I was blown away. I was completely blown away. It touched so many emotions of my childhood and all the memories. So tell me how it all started for you, this entire journey of the Romantics.
This whole journey started about 3 years ago. For a long time, I had wanted to make some kind of project, some kind of documentary or docuseries on that had something to do with Hindi cinema, and it's such a formative part of my experience and, my growing up. And unfortunately, you don't see a lot of exploration of the art and craft of Hindi cinema, not many people in sort of the, who are even interested in global cinema really understand, who the big filmmakers are in our field, what's the sort of cinematic language of Hindi cinema. And I wanted to explore that in some way, and, when I sat and thought about it, I felt like, there's so many different ways to tell that story, but when you're trying to make a documentary, you have to sort of choose a lens or prism, through which to explore whatever topic it is. And I felt for Hindi cinema, Yash Chopra was kind of a great lens through which to look at the journey of Hindi cinema. His own career spanned, well over 50 years.
Yeah.
He worked in different genres, and then he really came to define the idea, like he really architected the idea that we have of Bollywood or Hindi cinema today, in terms of like the big sweeping romances and multi-stars and things like that. So that's kind of how it all started.
And I have to ask you this, are you a romantic?
Yes, I would like to think so. Though I think for me, romance is way more mundane than what you see in the movies. I'm like, every time my husband,
It's grand,
puts gas
right?
in
In the
my
movie.
car, yeah, I'm like, that's so romantic, So
So tell me about the process of like getting so many big names together for this documentary, right? You see Mr. Amitabh Bachchan, Shah Rukh Khan, Ranveer Singh, Ayushmann Khurrana, like everyone just comes together for this epic storytelling. How did that come about?
yeah, it was actually surprisingly not as difficult as it seems, in the
Mhm.
sense scheduling was really difficult, getting sort of all the interviews scheduled was really difficult. But in terms of the desire, and willingness of people to participate, it
Mhm.
was it was pretty easy, because I think there's so much love, and respect for Yash Chopra, and such across like every generation, in the industry. And when people knew we had the blessing of the studio of Yash Raj Films to make
Mhm.
this series, then it was people were very willing to come on and talk.
How would you like in your own words sort of describe Yash Chopra's filmmaking versus Aditya Chopra's filmmaking styles? Do you see similarities, differences, inspiration derived from sort of, his father into his own films?
Yeah, I mean, I think the similarities are they are both absolutely obsessed with movies, and they have like a huge amount of respect for audiences,
Hmm.
which I think was really interesting. Uh, but they just go about it very differently. I think if I could describe it in, simple terms, the way I would describe it is it seems like Yash Chopra was all heart, and Aditya Chopra is, like all thoughts, like, brain.
Yeah.
And that's not to say they're both artists, they're both incredible storytellers in their own right, they're both auteurs in their own right. But I think, for Yash Chopra, filmmaking was a very interpersonal experience,
Hmm.
and he loved sort of being around people, and he loved the experience of, collaborating and working with his actors and working with the technicians and people on his crews. And for Aditya, he's obviously like a more private person. And I think he is as passionate about the sort of business of film and the business of the
Hmm.
film industry, and sort of building, Yash Raj Films into this, incredible global brand, as he is about making movies. And I think he finds a lot of creativity in that as well, and producing as well as directing. So yeah, I think you know, they're different, but they kind of have the same overarching sort of feeling when it comes to, you know, being filmmakers, of just like absolute passion for what they do and ultimate respect, you know, for the audiences that they make their films for.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize, and which I think you've sort of shed light on beautifully in the documentary or the series, is that a lot of what we see today stems from that original style of Yash Chopra filmmaking, right? So like, what are your thoughts on that? How it all like, you know, started and how it still continues today that people don't realize?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't think even I really realized it until I fully like started diving into this project. But like a film like Chandni is like the original text, you know, in terms of what we know of Hindi cinema, at least like what we knew of it in the 90s and 2000s, you know, that kind of heyday of the big sweeping, you know, romantic film with like all the different songs and, you know, all of that. I think that a lot of that was really you know, that was Yash Chopra's genius and vision when he made Chandni. And that film like was really it really went against, you know, the trend in the industry at the time, where things were really much more geared towards action and, you know, these big sort of you know, action films with big stars. And he, like, in spite of all of that, you know, he took a chance and made a movie that was, you know, like the total opposite. You know, it was just an epic romance, you know, had the foreign locations, and it had, you know, the gorgeous like white, you know, standout costumes and the incredible songs. And I think we can now, in hindsight, we look at it as a classic and we take it for granted that it was a classic. But you know, that film was a huge risk for him. But it's a risk I'm so glad he took, because it totally changed the trajectory, you know, of cinema at the time.
So how I want to kind of dive into the fact that Aditya Chopra is going to be on camera. I've seen it. I don't want to give spoilers, but how difficult was that? Was it easy to get him on camera, and how willing was he to share information?
Not easy to get him on camera at all. You know, as supportive and cooperative as the studio was, you know, when I pitched the idea of doing the series and, you know, needed access to all of the archives and access to the films and the music and everything. The one sort of boundary was that Adi is not going to talk to you, you know, like doesn't do that. And so, you know, I sort of proceeded, you know, fine. But as the story really started to develop, you know, as we were filming and editing, it you know, the family aspect of the story really evolved too. And it just seemed like really incomplete without him, you know, without his involvement. You know, obviously like Adi was Yash Chopra's son, but they were also collaborators, you know, they were colleagues and they built the studio together. So, you know, it just, something felt really missing, you know, without his perspective in there. And so, you know, we kind of slow rolled it, you know, like I started by just trying to convince him to just do an interview and let me record it for his own personal, you know, archives, without, you know, pushing him to grant me permission to use it. And then when he agreed to that, then I just started editing that interview into the series, in hopes that he would see what I saw, which is that he was such an important and integral part of the story. And thankfully, like when finally, after we had edited the whole series and put him in it, you know, without his permission, when he saw it and he saw how vital it was, he ultimately did agree.
Wow, it's amazing. And I want to kind of dive into the fact that, you know, people living in the diaspora, like, you know, connecting through movies and music is like our only medium, right, to the homeland. And I feel like this documentary does a great job at pointing that out too. Was this like a deliberate sort of messaging on your end?
Yes, of course. You know, I mean, I think it's sort of an integral part of the story, particularly in the mid 90s, you know, with DDLJ and you know, the sort of globalization that was starting at that point. Those worlds really started to blend, you know, the NRI world, you know, the diaspora world, and India. And you know, that's also my perspective, you know, like I was a diaspora kid. And though I was lucky to spend a lot of time in India growing up, I know, from a lot of family, friends and cousins and things like that, like a lot of us could only like either never got an opportunity, to visit India or even see India. And remember, this is like for a lot of us, this was before social media. It was before air travel. It was like, so much cheaper and more accessible. So, there would be, people would go years or decades, before they could come back home, to the homeland, so to speak. So like the films, were our connection. I learned about Karvacho through, and Holi, like through Hindi films. And, I think it was really important for me personally to touch on that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people connected on that point as well. Because I was in the audience, I do want to let you know, I think it was such a community experience of us watching the whole thing, because we were reacting to the same thing, laughing at the same thing, and getting emotional on the same sort of scenes as well. So I just want to congratulate you again on that as well. Can we kind of talk about, you as a filmmaker, what inspires you? What do you sort of, I know a lot of what you make kind of has it revolves around love, right? And that connection, that human connection. So can you talk about your filmmaking style?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, that love definitely, especially like the work that I'm most known for between Indian matchmaking and now the romantics, love is a big part of that. But actually, like the most common theme throughout all of my work is family, and particularly the, parent-child relationships,
Right.
And you see that, of course, in Indian matchmaking, it's about the search for a life partner, but it's also about navigating, tradition and, individuality within your family structure, not to, totally reject the ideals of your parents, but also wanting to carve your own path. And actually the themes in the romantics are pretty similar,
Yeah.
So that's something that's really important to me. I think it's so elemental to us as South Asians, it's something that we all have to navigate in some form or another. It just so happens that I think love and particularly marriage is where that tension kind of comes to a head sometimes, and so for as a filmmaker and a storyteller, that becomes, pretty interesting to me.
And can you tell our global audience as like, what is that one or two things that, they would take away from watching this docuseries, The Romantics?
I think what I obviously, I wanted to be a rigorous and sweeping look at, Hindi film and how it was impacted by major events, in India since independence, and then also how the films impacted culture. Obviously that, all those themes are important to me, but first and foremost, like even before all of that, I just wanted the series to remind people what we love so much about going to the movies and about cinema, I think especially in recent years, I mean, I didn't know this when, I started this project, but in recent years, we've been in kind of an existential crisis when it comes to the theatrical experience. I mean, this is not just in India, it's in the US too.
Everywhere,
it's everywhere. Yeah. So we've been in a little bit of an existential crisis, about what is the value of that experience, and are we going to be able to hold on to it, in the face of like technology and, evolving technology and things like that. And, there's something about that experience that I don't think I suspected that we're not ready to let go. And I want the romantics to try to capture that, and remind us of that. And hopefully I succeeded, hopefully it reminds people of just what we love about these movies. And actually that is something that kind of unites us, across different communities, different cultures, socioeconomic classes, like parts of the world, this is like such a unifier. And so hopefully people take that away from watching the series.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. And the fact that you mentioned family as well, I think I want to mention that a lot of what we have seen in our cinema, all these years is that it's such a family viewing experience, right? Everyone can sit together, watch a show, watch a movie, and get like the same sort of connection to the movies, and I think you do bring that, if I have to say. But yeah, no, this is amazing, Smriti. I look forward to all the work that you have coming up, and this was an amazing chat. Thanks for taking time and talking to Urban Asian.
Of course. Thank you guys so much. And thank you for everything that you're doing to amplify, all of the work that we do. It's a partnership. So I appreciate your role too.
Thank you.